Players gather to cast powerful spells, some of the oldest and most revered in the history of Magic the Gathering. Show and Tell, Shallow Grave, Lim-Dul's Vault, and many others. Battling head-to-head in brutal combat, they all have one thing in common: to uphold their legacy and the search for eternal glory.
The Eternal Glory podcast is brought to you by the minds behind Bosch and Roll on YouTube, Arabian University, and theepicstorm.com. This episode is sponsored by Moxfield and financial advisor and certified financial planner Nicholas Robb.
Hello, and welcome to episode 148 of the Eternal Glory podcast, Bargaining with the Metagame. We've already recorded 30 minutes of introduction and banter for the week, available in our supporter-exclusive free show. Check out patreon.com/eternalglory to gain access, or join as a YouTube member for the same content on YouTube instead. As always, I'm Phil Gallagher, aka Thraben U.
I'm Brian Coval, aka Bosch and Roll.
And I'm Bryant Cook of the Epic Storm.
Shout out to all our new paid patrons and YouTube members since the last episode. We've got Corey, John L, Jiao. There, I'm sure that's a Spanish name I'm not getting right. Sorry. Diogo. I did better on that one. Brian L, Ryan K, Daniel S, and SC Western. All of those people will get to enjoy hearing what the internet creeps are up to. Went quite into it in the pre-show this time, and the creeps are creeping lately. And if you want to hear those stories in detail, get in there. If you join that, you also get the Patreon feed, which is free of the inserted ads. So little reduced ad experience over there as well.
To win in Magic, adjust your strategy as the game changes. The same is true of investments. Nicholas Robb, financial advisor and certified financial planner, can help you create a game plan for your financial goals. Call 314-968-3783 or email nicholas.ropp@edwardjones.com. That's nicholas.raupp@edwardjones.com to get started today. Edward Jones, member SIPC.
And if you're interested to advertising to 10,000 plus Eternal gamers every episode, reach out to us. We're always accepting new sponsors.
Okay, folks, the last time we talked, some cards had just been banned. We recorded the day after the bans dropped, which was now 2 weeks ago and a day when we're recording. It'll be about 3 weeks ago when this goes live. And we want to talk about what we've seen, and then we're going to talk about Tarkir Dragonstorm. Two big things happened. The bans obviously always will shake up a format, and Tarkir Dragonstorm has been pretty high impact for a standard set on the format.
I have been very impressed by this set. I was excited about a couple of cards going into it, and then I realized maybe there were a few here that were more playable than I expected.
Right. We'll touch on some of that stuff as we go through the post-ban metagame and what we've been seeing. We'll do that first, but then we'll talk about cards directly in part 2. So the metagame first. What are you guys seeing? I kind of I'll just make the list and then we can go through it one by one. In order of MTG Goldfish and MTG Top 8 information, we've got Demir Tempo, Red Stompy, Omnitell, Oops All Spells, various Beans Piles, Painter, Izzet and Grixis Delver, Midrange Nadu, Death and Taxes. Those are sort of the top 10. Death and Taxes might be a little like top 12 or 13, but I put it in here because it's noteworthy that it's back.
There's a distinct lack of a deck here, which would be Demir Reanimator, a deck where I wasn't convinced that they were making the right call with Troll of Khazad-dûm. I'm still not entirely convinced. That said, I've played a few leagues now, and I've only run into Demir Reanimator once. It still beat me, but it's not showing up at the top of the metagame. I'm not sure if people just aren't interested in playing it right now, or if they haven't solved the new list yet. What is your opinions there?
So I saw a lot of it immediately after the ban, and then it was gone. I think enough people started to solve the Demir Tempo shell, and that was just low-hanging fruit for those pilots to gravitate towards, that I think it was not worth trying to keep working on the Demir Reanimator deck or transitioning it into Grixis or Bug or something like that. You were jumping through a lot of hoops to make something like generous and or Oliphant work. And it turns out Kaito and Tamio and Barogoyf are just good. Just play good cards.
Right, that's my experience as well. I queued into Reanimator 3 or 4 times in those first couple days, various shells. Some people going faster with Dark Ritual, like the old traditional red-black shells. I've been unmasked more times in the past 2 weeks than I was in the 6 months before that. I saw Oliphant getting thrown around a little bit. And yeah, that was in like the first 4 days, and I haven't seen Reanimator really since then. And I'm looking at the MTGO trophy dumps, and it does seem like in the April 15th dump, there was 2. In the April 13th dump, there was 1. On the 12th, there was 1. On the 11th, there was 1. It seems like 1 or 2 copies are sneaking trophies through most days, but it's not at the top of the metagame waving the flag saying, I'm here, this is mine.
The deck that is Demir Reanimator, and while, we were talking about Barglyph and all these things, I wanted to make sure that I knew what they were playing as Phil was talking about Kaito. So there's a card in here that, just brings me joy because of, in our last episode, Brian, you were like, you'll see it for the first week after bannings, Stifle. It is still here 2 weeks now later. Do you think Stifle will continue to see play in these Demir Temple shells, or do you think it's going to leave?
I mean, it depends on what the metagame dictates. I'm looking at lists, like I've been working on Bug Beans. Obviously, we'll talk about that more as the episode goes on, but I still like having 1 Stifle or 1 Consign in the main deck of that. It's a useful tool against stuff that is otherwise difficult to interact with. And the Demir Tempo list, I'm looking at one that won the most recent Legacy Challenge that has 2 Stifles in it. 2 is a number I can get behind. 4 is like, this is my plan. I'm going to stifle your fetch lands. I'm going to waste your lands. I'm going to keep you under days, and I'm going to deal exactly 20 damage before you get out of the squeeze. That's like how Rug Delver or Canadian Threshold, even pre-Delver, was built in like 2009. I don't think that deck is good. But having 1 or 2 Stifles, like you can clip Undercity Informer or Balustrade Spy with that. That's a way to interact with Oops in game 1 if you're on the play without needing Force of Will. This deck also has 3 Thoughtseizes, 4 Dazes, and obviously the 4 Force of Wills. Condensing your interaction against a deck like Oops that everybody needs to be respecting right now makes a lot of sense.
So historically, the Delver style decks, the Tempo style decks, are playing aggressive creatures early, trying to kill the game before your opponent's cooler, bigger spells can resolve. But the play patterns here have changed a little bit now. And I am often finding that I'm most afraid of a Tamio coming down on turn 1 and just representing a slow draw 3 or draw 4 cards over the course of a game if I do not immediately answer it.
Yes.
What is your experience in playing with and against Tamio in this post-ban metagame?
It's been years since the Tempo shells were just trying to deal 20 before the opponent got set up. Let's go all the way back. Let's try to take a walk together. We had Expressive Iteration. Those decks could grind better than the control decks into the mid and late game. We had Dreadhorde Arcanist. We had Wrenn and 6. We had Oko. We had Ragavan. These are all things that warped the shell to a spot where maybe we don't just need to deal 20. What if we have sources of actual card advantage in here and we can play normal Magic? But also we have some big O's like Nethergoyf that can crack for 4 or 5 starting turn 2. And Orcish Bowmaster, that's not a hyper-aggressive threat. Like, that's not a Tarmogoyf. It's not a 5-power creature. It's just something that, if you're patient and find your spot, can have massive influence over a game. It's a built-in 2-for-1. Even if they kill 1, you get the other body. Murktide Regent takes some time to set up. Kaito, like jockeying the game to a position where just one unblockable random shitter gets through one time, and now they have this untouchable giant thing. This deck is not built to Wasteland Daze crush you. It's built to Wasteland Daze keep you off balance till they sneak one of these big things in. And yeah, it is not. I am as worried about Tamio as I am about anything in this format right now.
If you look at Goldfish, you can paint a picture using data if you want. For example, if you filter by 14 days, which I think is a better representation of our current format, Beanstalk controls the 5th most played deck. But if you filter by 7 days, it is the most played deck. Do you think that's just one weekend's worth of challenge results? Or do you think that the Beanstalk decks are actually the best thing you can be doing now that Bargain is in the format.
So it's funny you would bring that up because I've been kind of just refreshing and clicking around Goldfish as we've been doing the pod to look at lists and whatever. And Beanstalk became the number one list since we've started recording. It was third at one point, and it's actually neck and neck, 9.2% with Red Stompy, and Demir Tempo seems to have dropped down to 8.2 from the 8.7 that it was on the 14-day scale. And, these numbers are changing quickly, but yeah, something that was true 7 days ago, but was not true 14 days ago is that Tarkir Dragonstorm is legal. And if it's Demir Tempo versus Bug Beans, I'd rather be Bug Beans. But if it's Omni Show versus one of those two decks, I'd rather be Demir Tempo. So maybe we just have a healthy metagame here and people are excited about the new card. I'm not going to react too quickly and say, anything is the best deck right now. Things are still shaking out. But obviously, the children yearn for Up the Beanstalk gaming after 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, whatever it was, of sowing Myco Spawn, making that not even remotely an option. Now Spawn is gone, and we have a huge new card that goes in the shell.
So you mentioned Omnitell. That is a deck that I have played twice in the last 2 weeks. I played it once with Mysterized Village. I am convinced that Omnitell is an extremely real deck, and I would not be surprised if it ends up being a top 3 deck once the metagame shakes out. We do need to wait for it to shake out, but the recent additions of Mysterized Village and Stock Up just are incredible, and the fact that you don't have to play kind of a shitter card like Cunning Wish anymore. The last list I played wasn't playing it because you could make the One Ring uncounterable using Mysterized Village, and that's definitely something I'm interested in. I believe that the Omnitell deck is just very good against the control deck, but in my experience when I was facing Demir Tempo, I felt like there was no chance for me to win unless I drew Carpet of Flowers, and I think I was playing 2 copies of Carpet of Flowers just wasn't enough.
So I don't think these lists have settled yet. I'm finding about half of the opponents that I'm playing against actually have the One Ring. So like I have a 5-0 list up right now that still has 3 Cunning Wishes in it. And I'm still seeing that from some of my opponents. I conceptually am very afraid of the One Ring when I am playing against this deck. But I've seen all sorts of weirdo show and tell takes over the last couple of days. One person was playing like essentially a show and tell control build. They had like Swords to Plowshares and Prismatic Endings, Supreme Verdict. Like they had the ability to control the game until they just boop, boop, it's all done. And it was uncounterable.
Yeah, and if you're blue-white, the Omni Show decks, going back a couple of years, they were either green for Veil of Summer or white for Teferi. And then you get some other stuff with those colors. Remember Shifting Ceratops? Phil remembers. Omni Show.
I remember.
Yeah, Simic Omni Show that pivoted into Shifting Ceratops out of the sideboard. That was a time to be alive. But we have the metagame went somewhere else for a long time, and now it's back. The mono blue shell, the only non-blue cards in one of these shells that I see putting up a lot of results are Cunning Wish targets when you're already in the Omniscience. And they're all the way back to like Firemind's Foresight and Release the Ants, so they can win full 8 instant speed over top of like a Leyline Binding trigger if Show and Tell resolves. That's something some decks have access to. Others are casting the One Ring. Adopting Mysterized Village could make something like a Teferi uncounterable, then all spells are uncounterable, or like Brian just said, the One Ring can be uncounterable. Or you could stay mono blue and just stick with Boseiju who shelters all, kick it old school, and go for speed in the matchups where that matters. There's a lot of flex to the shell, but Stock Up is undeniable, has been ever since it was printed. We knew this card would be good in decks that could Ancient Tomb it out, and guess what? It is.
So I am already feeling Show and Tell put pressure on the metagame. If we look at one of our other big contenders in the metagame, it's Moon Stompy at, 8-ish% of the format, depending on which data set you're looking at. And I am seeing a lot of Moon Stompy players shift back to good old Ashen Rider in the sideboard, which I don't think I've seen in probably like 3 years.
Yeah, I got my Ash Ridden the other day when I was playing Show and Tell. I was having a nice little run and worked up a spot where uncounterable Show and Tell versus some Demir deck, and they just put an Ashen Rider. And still, to the credit of the deck, I had like impulse into brainstorm, into find another brainstorm to try to hit a Cunning Wish over top of the Ashen Rider trigger and just win anyway. And I whiffed, but Red Stompy, top list on Goldfish right now, has 3 Ashen Riders in the sideboard, and that might be the metagame we're in if you need to respect that sort of thing. Personally, I've been moving in the direction of lock pieces in my sideboards, and we've talked about this on the pod for years. Like Bryant has begrudgingly co-signed Null Rod or Deafening Silence. Every time I tell people that's how you beat Storm, it's not a critical mass of counterspells, it's hate permanents, and then use your counterspells to protect the hate permanents. And I'm there with Show and Tell now. I'm playing Disruptor Flute in just all kinds of decks, not even Ancient Tomb decks. That card is just good. Make Show and Tell cost 3 more. They're really good at making it uncounterable or winning the counter war over it. So make it so they can't even cast it. I've registered Meddling Mage more times in the past 2 weeks than I have in the past 2 years. Chris Bakula is back in the format. I was actually recording a league today where I got to Meddling Mage Light from the Loam versus lands, and it felt like it was 2010. It was awesome. So there's room to explore here, and you got to do stuff. You got to adjust. I don't think this deck is out of bounds or anything. Like, we're not, in internet terminology, crying for a ban. But we're just saying this deck is real and must be respected, because you will lose to it if you don't respect it.
Also, to piggyback on what Brian was saying, uncounterable doesn't mean that it can't be affected on the stack. So I am a Mindbreak Trap hater, and I feel like people play it all the time when it's not applicable, like against like Oops All spells, how they can easily win through it. People have brought it up to me that you can Mindbreak Trap a Show and Tell if they use Misrari's Village. That is theoretically true. If you're willing to pay 2 blue for your counterspell on the Show and Tell. But if the Show and Tell player's playing 3 spells or 2 other spells and then the Show and Tell, I question their intelligence. But also, like, Mindbreak Trap isn't very good against that deck, because people are like, oh, well, you could just Mindbreak Trap the Show and Tell if they make it uncounterable. Yeah, you can, but I'm just not convinced that's like the avenue you want to take against Show and Tell in that matchup. It might work out for you once, but I just don't think it's a good long-term solution. So I just want to point that out. This isn't just me being a hater. I mean, it partially is a tiny bit, but I also just don't think it's a very good plan.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of other cards that if you want to spend 4 mana could work. I'm trying to think. Is it Put Away?
Humility. Fuck them.
Yeah, Humility. All right, it's not Put Away. I'm trying to remember what it is, but there's a bunch of like 4 and 5 mana, exile target spell, put target spell to the bottom of its owner's deck. You could play Venser Shaper Savant with Caracas and Cavern of Souls. Again, the old throwback Joe Lissette technology. There's stuff you could do. It's probably better to stop them from casting Show and Tell in the first place. I mentioned a bunch of hate pieces that could get you there, but how about Thoughtseize? Just reach in there and take it. Again, old school tech, but if Show and Tell is uncounterable, you could respond to it with Vendilion Click and take the thing they want to put in. Stuff like that still works. And there's the ways to fight this. It just isn't counterspells. And as I've been saying for years, trying to teach people, counterspells are not how you beat combo decks anyway.
I will say this. When I was playing the Omnitell deck, I got paired against a Beanstalk deck playing white, and they had Leyline Binding. And I was just like, oh, I don't care about that at all. So that might sound a little surprising to some of you, because you're like, oh, well, I let Show and Tell resolve, and then I put in Leyline Binding. Lists that play Cunning Wish absolutely do not care, because Cunning Wish allows you to then just go grab the 6 mana card that I can't think of off the top of my head.
Sublime Epiphany.
There we go. I even bought Japanese foils, and I can't remember the name.
It's because you can't read them. Buy English cards, you don't know their names.
Yeah, but so you can stifle the trigger, and then it just does nothing. All right, so that's one way. The other way is that most people that are playing Omnitell run like 3 or 4 copies of Sink into Stupor, and you could just bounce the Leyline Binding and then continue winning. And if they go to recast it, you just counterspell it. Like, that's why I'm comfortable cutting the Cunning Wish. Ashen Rider would certainly get me, I will say that. But Leyline Binding, a more commonly played card, would not. So I'm just not really afraid of Leyline Binding in that way. But, I mean, if you want to play Ashen Rider, you will certainly beat me playing Omnitell. I'm just letting you know that these O-ring type effects aren't all they're cracked up to be.
Yeah, I've found that you need that to be part of a package. Like if there is an uncounterable show and tell on the stack, you could put in your leyline binding and then fight over the Cunning Wish that's over top of your leyline binding trigger. And like you could still counter the spells that are being cast by Omniscience, even if the show and tell was uncounterable that jumped off the chain. And it's an uphill battle if your opponent's spells are free and yours aren't. But at least condensing the game to a spot where they have to win with instance only that's at least something. It's a plan you can sculpt towards. I'm big on Damping Sphere too. Sorry, I almost forgot about that one in my list. I've always been a big Damping Sphere boy, and that one you actually can just cook show and tell players. If they tap out for show and tell and you put in Damping Sphere, they put in Omni, their next spell costs 1, but they don't have 1, and Omniscience doesn't reduce that. And then they also can't counter your Leyline Binding or your Brazen Borrower or whatever it is that will then remove the Omniscience. I've been winning a lot of games that way.
You know how I want to win a game? Put in an Ashen Rider, nuke a show and tell player, and just, for the style points, throw Ashen Rider with broadside. 10 damage to the face. Let's go.
And you get to kill another permanent. Yeah, I mean, having broadside Bombardier in the deck that is putting a bunch of Ashen Riders in the sideboard now is a spicy meatball. I even noticed when I was playing against Ashen Rider the other day is that even like I was starting, my opponent put an Ashen Rider on my show and tell. I whiffed on the Cunning Wish over the top. My Omniscience got exiled. And then it's a 5/5. It hits hard, but you get a few turns. I was starting to set up another thing, and I was like, okay, I could just show and tell an Emrakul in, just raw dog it. But then I realized when you attack with Emrakul and annihilate the Ashen Rider, it exiles the Emrakul. So they may be annihilated, but they're taking 0 damage, and they still get to reset. Ashen Rider is such a cool tool to come back from the history of Magic to be relevant again.
Gentlemen, is it time where we talk about Oops All spells?
Let's just put some numbers on this. Obviously, going back, we wanted action taken against this with the last ban update. We didn't get it. There have been, I count 9 challenges in my cursory research since the bans at the time of this recording. Oops got 1st, 2nd, and 3rd in one of the first post-ban challenges. Since then, in the other 8, 4 of the 8 have 0 copies of Oops in them. 2 of the 8 have 1. 2 of the 8 have 2. So this could be just forming the old dredge metagame where if you're ready, you'll beat it. If you're not ready, it'll beat you. And I don't know. I haven't looked at the full construction and tournament path of all these Oops players and everything. These are like 32 to 50 player events, which is not huge. Also, it could just be, these are the people who woke up that Saturday and it's not that serious about a metagame. But it is 50-50 since that first weekend where Oops took 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, whether Oops penetrates or not. And the Showcase Challenge happened. 0 of the 30 qualified players chose to register Oops.
How do we feel about this?
That's a pretty big statement to me. If 0 highly, highly invested players feel confident enough in the deck to register it, I think people know that this deck has a target on its back. And the looming question is the deck so strong that with the target on its back, it can prevail? And that I think we need a little more time for.
Right. And these small invite-only tournaments, you can know who's in this thing, right? Is that how the Legacy Showcase qualifier works, or is this the 35 QP tournament? I don't actually know.
If it's the 30-person event, so having been qualified for a few of these, I know that there's a spreadsheet that goes around with what everyone qualifies for, and then decks that are within their range. Like, community members make this. I've had it shared with me before. They're just like, oh, this person qualified with Painter, but they're also historically a control mage, or whatever. Like, this gets shipped around, so that way when you get paired into someone, everybody knows what you qualified with and what you're likely to play. So it's not quite open deck list, but it's relatively solved. So maybe if you qualified with Oops All spells, playing something drastically different, like, I don't know, Cradle Control, could really help you. And especially if it's not something you've played before in the past. So these sort of events, I don't put a whole lot of stock in knowing, oh, like, this deck didn't perform well, because I think it's more of a guessing game than anything else. Like, I don't think it's indicative of the metagame at all.
Right. Solving a metagame where you know who's going to be there is a different thing than showing up to Eternal Weekend that's going to have 1,000 players and you have to beat 12 of them at random in a row. And just looking at the showcase qualifier, the people in it and what they played, Eternal Weekend winner Larson playing Cephalid Breakfast. That's his signature deck. JPA, top 8 with Sneak and Show, signature deck. True Futurism, top 8 with Cloudpost, signature deck. Sprouts with Land, signature deck. And then we've got like Moon Madness on Selesnya Depths. Mafouche Van Gogh on Dredge. Mapson and Einstein both in here on Midrange Nadu. Kulu Limpa on Red Stompy. These are just a bunch of Moto Grinders on their signature decks. So this was pretty predictable. And I don't know, I don't recognize any of these names as the people I associate strongly with Oops All Spells or even Fast Combo in general. I just don't see any of those people, the names I associate with that deck on this list. And if they were on this list, everyone would probably know what they were up to. And that's not to explain anything away. It's just like, why wouldn't anyone register this deck for this 30-person tournament if it is really the best deck and so unbeatable? There are different factors at play in a closed system like this than in an open system. I think the challenged information is more useful.
So as far as other decks that are floating around, I've seen a little bit of Painter in leagues. I've seen a little bit of other flavors of Delver, like Izzet and Grixis Delver. And I've seen a decent chunk of like mid-range Bant Nadu decks.
Yeah, I want to shout out real quick because I'm not sure if we have articulated it on the podcast yet. Painter's a blue deck now. Has been since Aetherdrift. Red Painter, the cards are all still legal, but when we say Painter is a top 5, top 10 deck, we're talking about stock-up Painter with blue at its core. Some decks splash other colors, a lot of them are mono blue. And if you haven't played Legacy in 6 months and you just listen to the pod and you're thinking of going to a Buffalo Chicken Dip tournament or something, be aware that's how these things are constructed now.
Yeah, if you see something that looks like 8 cast for a couple of turns, but something feels off, you're probably playing against Painter.
Right. If you see Ancient Tomb, be ready to play against Stock Up.
One thing that I have found interesting is that I've paired into Mono Black Reanimator twice. I've yet to see anyone play Faithless Looting against me. So even with, the banning happening and losing Troll of Khazad-dûm, the Reanimator players don't want to play Faithless Looting. They're like, no, that's just not something I'm interested in. They'd rather unmask themselves or find other ways to get the creatures to the graveyard.
Yeah, there's this dynamic that I've been thinking about a little bit, like a shower thought the other day, of if you're going to play a critical mass of looting style effects, the careful studies, the faithless lootings of the world, and a critical mass of things that are worth discarding from your hand, why are you not playing Dredge? Like, why would you build Reanimator like that in this day and age? Dredge, Mafouche is out there putting up results week after week. He's got lists posted. You can find a Dredge list if you want to draw and discard cards into some sort of graveyard engine without casting the card into him.
I just also think as far as big creature decks go, I think Show and Tell is just the low-hanging fruit for how do I put an Atraxa into play right now.
Yep, agreed. I think Show and Tell has supplanted Reanimator in that world. It's a deck that gets to play Force of Will and Stock Up, where in Reanimator can play Force of Will, but not the builds that have the critical mass anymore. Even the Reanimator, the tempo Reanimator decks that are still putting up a 5-0 here and there, I don't know that they're well constructed. They have a bunch of Tamios, Bowmasters, Barrowglyphs, and then just like 4 Entombs, 2 Monsters, 4 Reanimates. And I wonder how often they are winning because they had Reanimate in their deck versus losing because they drew Entomb in their Tamio deck.
I have to imagine most of those people are probably just playing the Demir Tempo deck at this point. Maybe somebody will solve Blue-Black Reanimator down the road, but right now, Demir Tempo just seems like the best thing you can be doing if you're interested in that Tempo game plan.
Right, this is a classic deck building question of, do I want to do something cute? Like, cute is usually the word that Magic players use to describe something that is powerful, but probably not good enough or consistent enough to base your deck around. How about you cut the cute cards is something I say to people who come to me for deck building coaching all the time. Like, you have 56 good cards here and then 4 things that will work if you're winning anyway. Like, what are we doing here? I always tell people, raise the floor of your deck. make your worst hand better. Don't make your best hand better. Keep more 7s. You don't want to have to mull to 5 just to find the pieces to make your silly little combo work. Build your deck to keep more 7s. Build your deck to have better bad hands. Your good hands should win anyway. And cut the cute stuff. So have we reached a critical mass where Entomb Reanimate inside a Tempo Shell is cute? I hope so. That's what the goal was. If you have an opponent who stabilizes at 4 life versus your Nethergoyfs, and then you draw 3 Entombs in a row, that's going to feel pretty bad. Those could have been Bowmasters or something else.
I just clicked on a deck that I feel like is worth sharing. You guys are going to love it. So Magic Online user KCC with Beanstalk control. I click in. I'm like, oh, Yorian Sky Nomad. And then Bloodbraid Marauder. I'm like, Architects of Will, Overlord of the Baelmerk.
Let's go.
Disciple of Freyles. Generous Ent, Elephant. And then I'm like, oh, it's just Living End, but 80 cards in Legacy, also playing up the Beanstalk and Leyline Binding.
Wow.
That's beautiful. Good job to that person out there doing the work.
I was just trying to see what a 5-color Yorian Beanstalk deck looked like, and I got this beautiful monstrosity.
Yeah, we learned. That's what it looks like. I will say I have played Bloodbraid Marauder Living End once in Legacy, and I 5-0'd with it. Oh, that's out there too.
All right. Do we have any other decks we want to talk about here before we start going into Tarkir Dragonstorm cards specifically?
Yeah, I want to give a couple minutes each to Nadu and Death and Taxes. Nadu, this is really interesting. Mid-range Nadu, just the Green Sun Zenith, put Nadu into play, draw enough cards to get your opponent to concede, versus ones that actually have Thassa's Oracle, like the Cephalid Breakfast builds. We saw mid-range Nadu disappear before the bans, and Cephalid Breakfast was the way to play Nadu. Now it is the opposite, at least according to Goldfish numbers. The last 7 days, we've got... it looks like Cephalid Breakfast is creeping up a little bit on the 7-day chart, but on the 14-day chart, it's a lot lower. It's at least below mid-range, which was not on the map at all. And Cephalid Breakfast was a top 5 deck for a while, and now it's like down in the 10 to 15 range. So, I mean, I think that's interesting. Was it Sowing Mycospawn keeping mid-range Nadu down the whole time, or was it Reanimator? I think it was Reanimator, right? We looked at a matchup matrix after... Yeah, I'm remembering that now. We looked at a matchup matrix after Eternal Weekend with like hundreds of matches of data or thousands of matches of data, and Nadu was really bad against Reanimator. So that's probably the difference. But it is noteworthy. There's 2 ways to play Nadu again.
Well, I have to imagine as the Nadu player, you landing a 3/4 flyer against the Tempo deck has to feel incredible because they're not a deck that has a lot of card advantage in it. Like, yeah, you have Tamio and 2 copies of Kaito, but Nadu creates a ton of card advantage, and then if you want to answer it, you're then putting yourself even further back, because there's no Atraxa draw 5 card button in the Demir Tempo deck to overwhelm Nadu, where it feels like Nadu now has the inevitability in that matchup.
Yeah, I've played a few matches lately where I'm going back and forth. I'm like killing the Nomad when it shows up. I'm, trying to keep them off the real insanity, but then they get a Nadu down, whether it's through Cavern of Souls, Delighted Halfling, or they just ran me out of interaction. And even without the Nomad or the Shuko, it's just like, yeah, this is the biggest creature in either of our decks. I can't push through this thing. If I try to remove it, they get to flip cards. And it's just a matter of time until they hit another Nomad, and then it's over. Yeah, through 3/4 flyer is just the biggest ass around.
I played against a really neat Nadu Infect deck the other day, and I got to kind of experience in live time, like, okay, Nadu, invigorate it, draw a card, attack in with a couple of Exalted triggers, become immense a Nadu, draw another card. And it was like, oh god, I just died to combat damage from regular old Infect. And this was just a massive distraction against control decks that could happen to sometimes kill you.
Right. And have we gone into Plagon, Lord of the Beach, Nadu builds on the podcast before? Because I've played against that a few times. I have one in my queue to record it. Plagon, Lord of the Beach, for those who don't know, 2 and a blue for a legendary Starfish Wizard. Wizard is important because Cavern of Souls overlap with Nadu. When Plagon enters draw a card for each creature you control with toughness greater than its power. It is itself a 0/3, so it draws at least one card on entry. And then for a blue-white hybrid, so a single mana, target creature you control hits with its butt this turn. And so this is a 3-mana cantrip. It's a legendary wizard, so Cavern and Caracas both work with it. Nadu has greater toughness than power. That's another draw. And it's a mana sink for Nadu. Just make Nadu or all your creatures attack with their butts over and over again. And Caracas protects the whole loop. Caracas can also pick up and put down Plague to draw cards. Caracas protects your Nadu. I have played against this deck a couple times, and I've never come close to beating it. It is Card Value City, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, that card is so feast or famine, where your opponent plays one, and you're like, that's not very good. And then a different time they play it, it draws 6 cards over the course of 2 turns, and you're like, oh no, bro, like, what do I ever do to beat this?
Or 4 cards immediately, because think about the creatures with toughness greater than their power. That's Delighted Halfling, Noble Hierarch, Birds of Paradise. Everything that would set up a deck like this is just laying around and waiting to be turned into money.
I just made an observation clicking through Goldfish lists because I was curious about the differences between all the tempo decks. Like, why is Demir tempo so much better than Temur Delver or Grixis tempo or Izzet Delver? So I wanted to click in. It's funny, if you look at Izzet Delver and Temur tempo, Demir tempo and Izzet Delver, they're essentially the same deck. It's just you swap Netherglyph and Dragon's Rage Channeler and Lightning Bolt and Fatal Push, and they're almost the same outside of the 2 Kaito slots, where in the red builds you have Unholy Heats and something else. But when you look at Temur Delver versus Izzet Delver, they're actually just the same deck, but one of them has 2 copies of Questing Druid, and then that's it. So Goldfish could have lumped those together and it would have been almost 8% of the metagame. And then I was like, okay, well, what about Grixis tempo? Because how's that different from Demir tempo? Well, it turns out that it's just 1 main deck Molten Collapse and then 2 sideboard copies of Meltdown and sometimes Pyroblast. That's it. So it seems like these decks are actually a lot closer than I would have guessed because the Grixis tempo builds, most of them don't have Dragon's Rage Channeler in it and have a very light red splash. So I think the numbers that Goldfish provides, they're technically accurate, but they don't tell you the whole picture because a lot of the decks that are towards the bottom of the front page are actually just the decks on the top too, just slightly different.
That tells an interesting story though. We could say Demir plus Grixis is actually 12% of the meta and it's more than we think. Or we can say that red splash is not worth it based on play rates and win rates. And the reverse is true for Temur versus Izzet Delver. The green splash is worth it based on play rates and win rates in otherwise the same deck.
Just throwing it out there, if you want to do what Bryant just did, check out Moxfield.com, sponsor of the show. They have a really nice compare feature that all of us love and use all the time. If you find yourself clicking through all of these decks and you want to go, well, how different are they? Instead of just having a bunch of different tabs open, you can just plug in 2 URLs into Moxfield, compare the 2 deck lists, and it will do that for you.
Yep, love that comparison.
All right, so Brian, you also wanted to say something about Death and Taxes.
Yeah.
Mostly, I assume that it exists.
Yes, that is the news. Death and Taxes exists. There was a challenge where it was 3 of the top 8 slots. So it not only exists, but it is winning at least a little bit. It seems like black-white Yorion Taxes featuring Overlord of the Baelmerk is kind of where we are with that. The era of Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, has largely passed. I don't even see her in sideboards anymore. Sorry, Bryant, your daughter. She's no longer in decks, but you're going to have to change your name. She could go by her middle name now, which is Karn the Great Creator. But yeah, Death and Taxes is back. It's leaning on the Orzhov Sewer engine with Thalia plus Overlord. And yeah, as always, this deck can grind. And White Orchid Phantom, high numbers in the main, flickering that thing could run a lot of legacy decks out of lands. 4 Thoughtseize in the main, which again, if we're comparing the success of Demir tempo and the Izzet-based tempo decks, Thoughtseize is a big difference between the two. I love Thoughtseize. Going back to show and tell, you can't stop them on the counter war, so take the card away. Thoughtseize is well positioned here, and Black-White Tax is out here doing the thing.
I watched Daily MTG the day after the bannings, and Carmen Handy was on there, and Carmen said that she wanted it to not be embarrassing to register a mid-range deck. That was one of the goals of the banning, because she loves the green mid-range decks, but also she specifically called them the pre-format or pre-war form-aware decks of the format, which I have to imagine is this Orzhov Death and Taxes deck, right? Like, this is what people want to play in Legacy. It's relatively budget-friendly, and I say relatively because it's still like $1,500, but that is within reason for Legacy.
Yeah, adding a splash color, fetch lands, and dual lands really hurt the billing of Death and Taxes of a tier 1 deck with no reserve list cards, but still, Scrubland's a lot cheaper than Underground Sea.
As far as the deck goes, I feel really awkward about the sideboard because so much of Legacy right now is sideboard Leyline of the Void, but mulliganing to Leyline of the Void in your 80-card Yorion deck is maybe something that you don't want to do. So a lot of times you'll see these D&T sideboards doing other aggressive things. So you'll see some number of Deafening Silence, Graft Digger's Cage, Mindbreak Trap to get you out of those early turns. I saw a 5-0 list that was playing 4 copies of Angel's Grace. And in case you don't know that one, that's the split second. You can't lose the game this turn. Your opponents can't win the game. If you would die, you go to 1 instead, sort of thing.
That's only for Oops All Spells too, and Doomsday. Like, all-in Thassa's Oracle decks are the only decks that are affected by Angel's Grace. So that person had somebody in the sniper scope. They knew exactly who their target was.
Oh, that was a 15-card Oops All Spells sideboard. Like,
fun fact, Tendrils of Agony will still win through that card. Eventually.
Yes, they can't lose this turn, but they do lose life. They don't take damage, and then you pass the turn and they just die if they can't gain life before then.
Correct. But Phil, going back to your initial point there, I also don't love the mulligan to Leyline play pattern. We talked about it a little bit in the pre-show. I feel like I am obligated to play Leyline of the Void in Storm at the moment, and I just don't love the play pattern of like, I'm going to pair into Oops All Spells at least once or twice this league. I have to play Leyline. And it's just like, oh, I didn't open up Leyline, I'll mulligan. No Leyline, mulligan. Like, that sort of thing just isn't fun. And I understand, people don't always find Storm combo fun. I get that. But it's not something that I personally enjoy about the current era of Legacy. And maybe that's just something I need to suck up and get over. But I'm hoping that it changes in the future, because I think being forced to play Leyline of the Void and mulligan to it just isn't great for Legacy.
I concur.
Here, here.
Let's take a little break, and then we'll come back and talk about Tarkir Dragonstorm. All right, guys, what are you looking at in Tarkir Dragonstorm?
Well, I'll start with one that didn't make your list for the show notes. Tersa Light Shatter. This is seeing a little bit of play in Moonstompy. I already have recorded my video with it, and I poked the Moonstompy Discord being like, hey folks, you should probably play this. So this is a 2 colorless, 1 red, 3/3 haster. When it enters, discard up to 2 cards, then draw that many cards. And whenever it attacks, if there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard, exile a card at random from your graveyard. You can play that card this turn.
So it's Fable the Mirror Breaker with some potentially dope flavor text?
That is correct, yes. So a lot of the aggressive flex slots in Moonstompy right now are kind of bad. For years, the deck wanted to be playing Goblin Rabble-Masters and Legion War Bosses, and sometimes even more cards that looked like that, because they just get people dead so quickly. But in the current metagame, where Barrogoyfs are everywhere and you don't want to be attacking your 1/1 goblin tokens intentionally into that giant life-linking body, it is just such a risk to play those cards. Having other aggressive options is a big deal, and Tersa specifically helps to fuel the graveyard for Pyrogoyf and helps you loot towards powerful haymakers like the One Ring. This is a very good card that should be on your radar if you are a Moonstompy player.
Yeah, as a control player, Fable Chapter 2 is frequently the scariest thing that Moonstompy can do in the early game, because they have to keep a hand that could just has mana to cast a thing or two. And then from there, a lot of the games where a fair deck versus Moonstompy comes down to, I fended off the first 2 things, hope they don't rip a third thing. And the more looting and moving cards around and sculpting the hand that the red deck can do, especially if that bridges them into the One Ring, at which point they're unbeatable. This just a little more of this makes a lot of sense. It is a legend, so you probably don't want to pile up on them, but if you have like 2 slots, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I played 4, and the legend rule absolutely came up a couple of times. The other thing that's a little weird here is it starts to shift your evaluation of Orcish Bowmasters. Bowmasters is often, hey, that card is kind of annoying, but you usually just have the One Ring and Fable. But when you start throwing maybe 4 other card draw effects on top of that, Bowmaster goes from a bit of a nuisance to like, hey, this card's a bit of a problem. I probably need to Fury that.
Another new card from Tarkir Dragonstorm is Stormscale Scion, which is a 6-mana dragon, 4 red for a flying dragon, has Storm, and all other dragons you control get +1/+1. A lot of people in the Storm Discord were really excited about this card because you can't Fluster Storm it, which I guess is technically true. It is not an instant or sorcery, but it still loses the game just as well as every other card with Storm to Consign to Memory. And that's the big problem here. I guess theoretically I'll never play Ave Progenitor Ooze ever again, but I'm also probably not going to register this card. I think people are excited because it's a pretty cool card when you look at it, and who doesn't love large dragons? Like, there's a Timmy inside of all of us, but I'm just not convinced that this card is actually playable. If you want to do the work to make it playable, I suppose that's cool, but even in Ruby Storm, I think there's better things you can be doing.
It's just cool that there's a dragon with Storm in a set called Dragonstorm. They did it. All right, I'm going to go to a banger next. It's my turn. We're talking about Rakshasa's Bargain, which I believe we talked about in the preview episode, maybe even 2 episodes ago, whenever this thing was first previewed. It is black, blue, green. Each of those is a hybrid 2 mana. So the mana value is always 6, no matter how much you spend on it. Look at your top 4 cards, put 2 in your hand, 2 in the graveyard. This is, I think, single-handedly rejuvenating Beans. The card selection on this is bonkers. It's comparable to Stock Up. You see 1 less card, but your graveyard is a resource if you're flipping stuff like Uro or Light from the Loam. That's just available to you if you're just stuffing the graveyard for the Murktides and Murderous Cuts that also make Beans sing. It does that too. We're kind of nearing the end of the pod, and I feel like we're going to talk about Bargain a lot in the coming months. I just wanted to shout it out. It is as good as advertised, maybe better. I've actually gone so far as I'm now main decking Endurance in every deck that I have up the Beanstalk and Rakshasa's Bargain in, just so I don't deck myself, because the cards flow so freely.
Well, 2 things, Brian. 1, you left out Witherbloom Command, which is another synergy with Bargain that's just great. But also, Endurance is just good against the metagame, right? Like, if Oops All Spells is everywhere, why wouldn't you play the additional interaction spell that Bargain now gives you the extra green cards for? I think it just makes sense.
Yeah, the tempo decks all care about their graveyards too, whether it's Nethergoyf, Murktide Regent, Dragon's Rage Channeler, Oops All Spells is out there. The Beanstalk mirrors, a lot of them are using Loam or they have their own Murktides. Endurance is great there. I just think Endurance is well positioned again, and that was one of our favorite cards coming out of MH2 all those years ago. And when Endurance is good in Legacy, when I could pop that in a main deck as a 1 or 2 of, I'm usually pretty happy with the format.
So I have been testing a different dragon, Clarion Conqueror, 2 colorless and a white for a 3/3 dragon with flying. Activated abilities of artifacts, creatures, and planeswalkers can't be activated. This card shuts off a lot of stuff.
Fuck this card. I apologize for my language.
Yeah, you have a 0/3 Tameo. You're not attacking into my dragon. You have a Tameo Planeswalker. No, you don't. You have a clue token. Fuck your clues.
You constructed your deck around Lion's Eye Diamond. Eat a dick.
Yep. It shuts off all artifact mana. They are all activated abilities.
Yes, it is Null Rod, and it's Curse Totem, and it's is there one for Planeswalkers? I think there is. It's like some 5 mana something or other. The Immortal Sun. Does that shut down Planeswalkers? Okay. It's an Immortal Sun, a Null Rod, a Curse Totem, all on a 3/3 flyer. This thing hits like a truck. It blocks like a boss. It's a little awkward in Chrome Mox decks, because if you pitch a card to ramp this out, you've just -2 for 1 to yourself. But if you're doing that, I hope it's a matchup where it's worse for them than it is for you. I have both played this in White Initiative as a feature, and I've played it in the sideboard of Dreadnought decks that have Ancient Tomb, and it's really good at doing the job that it's assigned to do.
Yeah, I have played this in Chrome Mox Lotus Petal decks. It's awkward. I don't think in those sorts of decks, this is a shove 4 in the main deck. I played against an opponent who was doing like a white Urza Saga Stompy deck with Dreadnoughts and Hushbringers and that sort of stuff. And they had it there. That might be more of a home. But it's even going to shut off the activated abilities of mana creatures that you would use to power this out. So it's not like if you cheat it out with Noble Hierarchs, that is significantly better than cheating it out via Lotus Petal or Crump Mox.
Yeah, like land Ancient Tomb is the safest way to cast this thing.
I had a discussion with a friend about this card specifically because they're like, what do we do against this? And I said, you lose. It's very similar, in my opinion, to Archon of Emeria as a Storm player, where essentially now the initiative decks just have 8 copies of Archon of Emeria. And what I mean by that is for years, and I mean years, the answer to Hate Bears was Massacre. And then Magic has sort of shifted over the last, probably 5 to 7 years, where Massacre, in my opinion, has not been good enough. Collector Oof was the start of that, where it was the first Hate Bear that didn't really require your opponent to have a basic planes in, or I shouldn't say a basic, but a planes in play. And then Archon of Emeria was sort of the nail in the coffin, where it had a 3-butt. And now there's Clarion Conqueror, where it's another reason that Massacre just isn't good enough. And yeah, you might be saying, oh, well, get a new card that's better than Massacre. There's no real better card for beating Hate Bears. And I mean, I haven't played Massacre in years. It's just the fact that creatures keep on getting larger and larger, but the options for sweeping these style of Hate Bears hasn't gotten any better.
Yeah, it's probably like end step dress down, untap, try to do stuff is if you want to turn off whatever Hate Bear they have at whatever size it is. Dress down is a tool, but obviously you can't Burning Wish for that. It depends on the construction of your deck. If you're a Thassa's Oracle deck, obviously you can't use Dress Down to set up your win. There are some squeezes there. We might be at the super slow phase of Burning Wish for Toxic Deluge.
Yikes.
And hope you still have life total when it's over.
I think the card that I think is likely going to be the staple for a very long time out of this set that isn't Bargain, because I think Bargain is like the real deal for a very long time. But after that, Mistrized Village is probably the best card in the set. I think that's going to be a card that people complain about 5, 7, 10 years down the road. They're like, oh, why did they have to print Mistrized Village? Like, it's going to be the thorn in the side of blue mages for a very long time. I think the card's just very real. People are so concerned with the fact that it doesn't make a mana when you make something uncounterable. I'm not sure that matters. It's just so much better than Beseiju, who endures for what it does. Or, wait.
Who shelters all.
Yeah, I realized it after I said it.
I've done that multiple times. Yeah, remembering Beseiju's full name is suddenly relevant. We weren't ready for that in 2025. The obvious applications of Mistrized Village, just making show and tell in the One Ring uncounterable, that is surface level stuff. I'm really interested in like breaking open control mirrors by making my Teferi or my Narset uncounterable. It's just any spell. It's not even non-creature. It's not instant or sorcery. It's your next spell cannot be countered. I think that in a deck like Uro Loam Band, putting one Mistrized Village in a deck that plays a bunch of forests anyway, that's something I'm going to be exploring. And maybe if my opponent puts a show and tell on the stack or something with 4 Force of Wills to back it up, I make my next... And you don't even have to spend mana. It's not like Beseiju where you have to tap the mana of Beseiju into the spell. You can activate Mistrized Village and then Force of Will something. And your force is uncounterable.
Oh, that's a sweet line I did not consider. I love that.
It's wild, dude. Or like getting locked out by Chalice of the Void. I've had so many games where I let an early Chalice resolve and then I just happen to flood out into Ponders, Brainstorms, and Plows as the game goes long. And I die with like 7 lands in play. If one of them's Mistrized Village, I can plow one thing or cast 1 Ponder per turn cycle. And that's usually enough. It usually is just like, God, please just let me draw 1 Prismatic Ending, 1 Leyline Binding, 1 Teferi to clear this Chalice, and then I can never lose. And just turning off, getting 1 spell a turn is good. There's a lot of exciting application for this beyond the very obvious things.
Something not obvious, it's not legendary. You were talking once per turn. Well, if you happen to draw 2 of them, you could play 2 Ponders per turn, or 2 copies of Swords to Plowshares, which is also an option. I don't know how many of this you want to be playing, but if you are running multiples, you could be rewarded for drawing both. The other thing I wanted to mention is I actually bought the full cycle of cards, because the prices were just good on them, and then afterwards, I'll admit, I looked up what they did. The rate on Mysterized Village is ridiculous compared to the others.
The others are so embarrassing.
The others, it's like 4 mana for 2/1s until the end of the turn. It's just like, why would you ever pay 4 mana for 2 points of damage that your opponent can block? It's just like, people complain about like how Wizards favors blue. When I read the rest of the cycle, I was like, okay, I can kind of see where people are coming from when they're like, oh, Wizards is obviously favoring blue all the time. Like, Mysterized Village is just so much better than the rest of these that it's embarrassing.
I think it's a pretty clear case of balancing releases around standard. And, standard is so mana hungry and spells get so big and people are tapping out for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 drops every turn. Like, hardcasting Atraxa has been a part of the standard metagame since we've gotten Atraxa. So when do you have time to spend 2 extra mana to make your spell uncounterable, much less 3? Like, they probably tested that really hard and realized like one is the balancing spot where this card might actually see standard play. I don't know. It's obviously looks really embarrassing from the legacy lens, but if you think about how they probably got there, that ability is just not very good in standard, and they had to push it where just crapping out 2 1/1s with your mana might get it done.
All right. And I need one of you who plays more formats to explain Corey's Steel Cutter to me. I don't get it. So this is 1 in a red for an equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has trample and haste, and it has flurry. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, create a 1/1 white monk creature token with prowess. You may attach this equipment to it.
Okay, Phil. So let's say, is it Delver? Cut your Delvers, play 4 of these instead. What does that look like? Turn 2, Corey's Steel Cutter, Bauble, in for 2. What are they going to do? Fatal Push that? Next turn, Ponder Delver, or Ponder another Corey Steel Cutter. I'm going to fumble that every time. Corey Steel Cutter. I got it. Another Steel Cutter. Or Steel Cutter into Ponder, make 2 monks in for 4. Like, your baubles get crazy. Mid-game, if you're running out of stuff to do, like bolt their creature, daze your bolt, pay for the daze. Now you have a 2/2 prowess, haste trample in play. No deck that wants to keep up with cards like Lightning Bolt and Fatal Push and Swords of Plowshares will ever beat this card. It's just a constant shitter. It's Bitter Blossom, but the creatures have haste and trample and prowess. You have to fully run Delver out of things to put on the stack at all, not just threats, because this will provide the threats if they can put anything on the stack at all. Also, it's just an equipment too. You can equip for 1 in a red. Mid-game, Murktide, equip this in.
Okay. All right.
This card is very exciting. And that's not even talking about if you want to get real buck wild with it with like lava darts and gut shots, which I've seen coming up in Modern already. I think Steel Cutter will prop up, and we actually just had this conversation already about Delver is not trying to deal 20 with stifles and dazes and just barely get out the door anymore. They want recursive engines, recursive sorts of card advantage, making a monk every turn. And the monk's not legendary. Like, if the first one doesn't die and you cast Ponder Lightning Bolt on your next turn, now you have 2 monks with prowess, and the new one has haste. Like, this is a wild engine for a deck that's built on spell velocity to have access to.
I have a confession. I have read this card twice after people have posted about how sane it is on Twitter, and I'm just like, I don't see it. It just seems like a ledger shredder to me. It wasn't until Brian said that it has prowess that I realized that my brain had been auto-completing the card, and I've just skipped the word prowess multiple times. I've just read to the point where it's like, create a 1/1 white creature token, and then I'm like, oh, you may attach this equipment to it, and just skipped over the word prowess twice. Knowing that the monk has prowess completely changes this card for me, because I thought that it was just a 1/1 making another 1/1 each turn that gets +1/+1 trample and haste. I'm like, yeah, whatever. It's a glorified young pyromancer. Knowing that they have prowess makes this card so much better in a format with Ponder, Brainstorm, etc.
Yeah, I think this one will change how people think about cards or removal in the format. if these Delver shells pick it up, like a card like Fatal Push starts to look pretty bad. A card like Witherbloom Command or Kolagon's Command or Prismatic Ending starts to look really good. You have to deal with the source because any 2 spells, they're right back in the red zone. And their deck is nothing but spells.
Imagine playing Monastery Mentor now. Couldn't be me.
I have Monastery Mentor releasing on my channel. It's probably going to come out like 2 days before this pod does. I tried. I went way back into the memory banks and had some fun with a list, but I think Corey Steel Cutter is the Monastery Mentor for the future.